The following podcast is brought to you by PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Audio is provided by Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com.
Well, welcome to Charlie Crimebuster. We're talking about the Karen Read retrial today. We're going to talk about the battle of the experts, and also, did the prosecution have that legal Hail Mary we talked about last week? Plus, we're going to give you a bonus. All of that and more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. It is what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. All individuals described or mentioned in this presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to Charlie Crimebuster. Glad to have you aboard the old Charlie Crime train today. Boy, we've got a good one. We're going to be going around those twists and turns on our train ride today that we see in a wonderful mystery. Now, when I say wonderful mystery, it's not wonderful what happened to John O'Keefe. Of course, that's not wonderful. It's terrible. We want justice for him. But if you like mysteries, if you are a crime junkie, if you are a crime fan, as I often say, this has more twists and turns than a Disney roller coaster for sure. Thank you for joining us. Hey, by the way, if you're a seasoned listener or if you're a first-time listener, let me invite you to reach out with a shout-out. You can reach yours truly by just emailing charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. You can ask questions. You can make suggestions about other episodes you'd like for us to cover. And you know what else we often say? Well, we say it every day that you hear these podcasts. You can also lodge objections. That's right. You can disagree. In fact, we'd love for you to disagree. That gives us kind of a little dialogue to go on. We want to be very careful to let you know that we're very appreciative of your download today. The thousands of downloads actually humble us. So thank you for being a part of the Charlie Crime Train today. Hey, by the way, if you'd like to check out our sponsor, it is PeacemakerNetwork.com. There we're going to talk about, on that particular website, you're going to read about the brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. They are what I call the real heroes, those first responders that come when you need help. Law enforcement, of course, and we cannot forget the brave men and women of the military. Go on over there, check that out. You might want to become a part of it. You'll see how you can. All you got to do is click on the link. And last but not least, in these housekeeping chores today, we want to invite you to check out the other episodes. You can go to our YouTube channel, just kind of hashtag it Charlie Crimebuster. You see a whole host of episodes. Or if you'd like to go to our own website, charliecrimebuster.com, you'll find them there, about 200 plus of them. Well, actually, I was told there were more than that, so just go check it out, charliecrimebuster.com. You can find all kinds of things. By the way, you might want to check out the Kohlberger series that we did on the terrible, terrible killings of those 4 Idaho college students. You see, that trial is coming up in August. That way you can kind of be up on the news and know what's going on and ready for a new series that we will no doubt be engaged in. So again, thank you for joining the Charlie Crime Train today. Let's get on board and let's get at it. We're now in the 6th week of the testimonies in the Karen Read murder retrial. Karen Read, of course, is charged with allegedly striking her cop boyfriend, John O'Keefe, with her SUV and leaving him for dead in the snow outside another cop's home. This was after a night of heavy drinking with friends on January 29 in 2022. Now, while Read's lawyers on the other side, they contend, no, she didn't hit him, but she was framed with a vast law enforcement conspiracy. They've suggested that O'Keefe was actually beaten inside 34 Fairview Road and then attacked by the homeowner's dog. There are many experts involved in this trial, and we have heard from a number of them on behalf of the prosecution. But even then, there have been some Perry Mason moments. And those moments, well, they've lobbed some doubt in the minds of many. But is it enough doubt for reasonable doubt? Now, the defense will also introduce their own experts. Some of the same experts that imploded the prosecution's case in the first trial brought that one to a hung jury. That's why we introduced this as Karen Reed's second trial. Now, on Tuesday of this past week, we heard from the last expert the prosecution brought to the stand. That is, in their own case in chief. That's when the prosecution gets done with sharing with us their evidence. And the guy that we heard from was Dr. Judson Welcher. He was from that company, Aperture. By the way, that's the very same witness, our company rather, that I was referring to last week, when I stated that the prosecution might need a Hail Mary to put his case back between the rails after intense cross-examination from the defense. Now, I also told you that I felt it would be somewhat an uphill battle. Because, you see, Dr. Welcher, well, he was affiliated with the same company that misrepresented on their website the other expert, Shannon Sturgis' own academic credentials. And Sturgis, of course, was demolished on the witness stand from a Perry Mason moment by Robert Alessi. He is a partner of a New York-based firm who's joined Alan Jackson and his team. He's a new lawyer that was not with the team in the first trial. Now, not only did this expert, Shannon Burgess, not have a bachelor degree, but get this, the degree that was attributed to the prosecution expert said that he had, well, that degree wasn't even offered in the institution that was listed on the website that was affiliated with that representation. So this was the setup that this new witness is actually facing. He's now facing the fact that he's a part of a company that misrepresented the truth about the education of a fellow expert. This is what this last prosecution expert is facing. So it needs to be a Hail Mary for sure. So Dr. Judson Welcher, he's an engineer and an accident reconstructionist. By the way, he's the one they really brought in to take the role of Trooper Paul in the first trial. But let me tell you some things about Dr. Welcher as he was on the stand. I must say, he was not in the least bit intimidated by the stringent cross-examination from Alessi. In fact, on cross, he was a very difficult expert for the defense to cross. But the question that some are asking is, did he go too far in dancing around with the defense attorney as he was questioned? Sometimes that can cause juries to dislike you. And according to one poll, don't know whether it's a neutral poll or not, but according to one poll, he was disliked by 80% on the poll. But remember now, you can dislike a person, but they can still go very far in providing evidence that supports the prosecution case. Now, let's go back and talk about some of the direct testimony before he was cross-examined. At the end of his direct testimony, Tuesday's testimony of this past week, Brennan, the prosecutor, he asked a pointed question from the good doctor. He asked if Welcher believed, based on the analysis of the evidence, he said, what do you believe based on the evidence of that you've given, the analysis of that evidence, do you believe that Reed's Lexus collided with O'Keefe around 12:32 a.m. on January the 29th, 2022? And here's his answer. Hang on to your hat. Yes, he said, based on the totality of evidence, that is what happened. Whoa, wait a minute. This is an expert witness. You see, expert witnesses, they don't testify that way. And of course, there was a big, large objection. And, well, the judge told the jury to disregard the answer. You see, experts, they can testify to a scientific degree of certainty, but they cannot say that is what happened. You see, from an expert, it's a no-no. And probably this witness already knew that. But he blurted it out anyway, and of course the judge said disregard, but do juries ever disregard that? Also, under his direct testimony, he actually played videos of tests that he conducted using another Lexus as an exemplar. It was another way of saying that he had bought the very same Lexus model that Reed had driven that night. Now, one of those tests, the Lexus backed up at 2 miles per hour and struck his right arm bent and holding a cocktail glass. Interesting enough, he was kind of dressed like the victim, John O'Keefe, was that night. So after that test, there was blue paint that was on the taillight, and that was actually transferred on his arm, and it left a large mark. And when compared side by side with photos of O'Keefe's injuries, I got to say, they were similar in the coverage area. But now remember, he did that at 2 to 3 miles per hour. But all of us probably were thinking, if he wanted a real test, why didn't he test it at a faster speed that he suggested that the SUV was going in reverse? He could have done that with a dummy, so why didn't he do that? I was wondering that, others were wondering that, but is the jury wondering that? Now, during cross-examination, Welcher, he said he did not use a crash dummy because he would have only had 1 or 2 shots at it before it damaged the car. And, you know, those vehicles do cost a pretty penny. But you can't have to still wonder, why did not they test it in a way that would more fit with the prosecution's theory? Would it still leave that paint in the same way if that vehicle was traveling much faster than 2 to 3 miles per hour, more toward the 20 plus that they were talking about? But he went on to say that pedestrian impacts are so sensitive to initial angles. And he said, I was not going to hit myself with a Lexus at 20 miles per hour. But again, why not the dummies? Now, Welcher also pointed out that there was a bruise on O'Keefe's right knee, approximately at the height of the bumper of Reed's SUV. He then went on to say that the cuts on Reed's arm was consistent with geometry and the orientation of the right tail light. But yet he still admitted upon cross-examination there was a lot of information still unknown about the physics of that crash. And by the way, I don't know whether that rung a bell with you or not, but we do know that the defense ARCA witnesses that are coming along, they do have a lot of expertise in physics. Now, my friend, it's easy to get lost in the woods of all the experts testifying on their own scientific terms. So yours truly, Charlie here, I'm going to help us all get a handle with some key words to hang on to. I'm going to call them memory hooks. This is the bonus part that you're getting in today's podcast. Some ways for you to remember some of the key evidence in this trial, because there's so much out there. There's so many things, and it's like trying to take a drink of water from a fire hose to get it all together. So I'm going to give you some memory hooks for you to use. One of those I'm going to introduce at this time as we're covering Dr. Welch's testimony, Hail Mary, for the prosecution. Now, I'd previously given you one called the Proctor Factor, referring to the disgraced lead investigator that was fired after the first trial. So now to add to the phrase the Proctor Factor, I'm going to also throw in the BB Factor. It is important to this case. By the BB Factor, I'm simply referring to the broken bone factor. You see, the defense has already introduced the fact that it appears that if Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe, especially over 20 miles per hour in reverse, there would certainly be broken bones. And this, my friend, has been a challenge to the prosecution. Now, sometime back, before the second jury was even sworn in, on our YouTube Charlie Crimebuster channel, I was asked a question on how the prosecution could strengthen their case this round. And I told James Buckland, our producer, that if I was a prosecution, I'd find other cases where someone had been stricken by a vehicle in a similar manner and there were no broken bones. Well, you would have think they heard what your Crimebuster was said, for guess what? They did just that with this expert. The witness did just that. He used a case where a pedestrian, who unfortunately was actually killed in a vehicle strike, and yet not one real broken bone other than a few cracked ribs, but they weren't broken. So that appeared to be somewhat a victory for the prosecution. They were saying there is a way you can get hit and not break a bone. However, in my opinion, it could have been a little too much. You know why? Because when he put on that chart all the injuries that this guy got without a broken bone, even though there were no broken bones, they were serious injuries that John O'Keefe did not have. So if Jackson is smart, and we know he is, he could actually take the chart that they used as their example in the prosecution, and he could say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Now, do they still say that? I don't even know if that's proper in today's time, ladies and gentlemen. But anyhow, he could say, folks, this is what a person would look like, and the injuries would look like if John O'Keefe was hit by a vehicle, and he did not have those kind of injuries. Now, in a moment, I want to tell you about another memory hook you can use to keep up with the evidence. But right now, it's time for us to pause and take a moment and share with you what we call Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, our Crazy Crook story now is right off the press, and just a county away from where Crimebuster resides here in the Sunshine State of Florida. A wanted man literally dropped in on a group of Flagler County Sheriff's Office deputies Monday, May the 26th. Yep, he crashed right through the ceiling of a home. You see, the deputies, they were searching a house when they discovered the man hiding in an attic. And as the K9 climbed up into the attic, the man got a little excited, took a wrong step, and crashed through the ceiling, leaving a big ragged hole in the ceiling. And I absolutely love what the deputy said. He said, quote, hey, you should have just come out, man. That would have been easier. That's what he told him as he led him away in handcuffs. And it would also have saved the cost of repairing the ceiling. Taryn Lovell Weaver, 37 years of age, was charged of obstruction without violence, false name ID given to a law enforcement officer, according to the charging affidavit. Now, Weaver, he was wanted on a felony warrant from here in Volusia County, where I am. And that was referenced battery by strangulation. Mean guy there. And he's going to remain at the Flagler jail as of Friday. So this crazy crook on run from the law to hide out in the attic, only to make a wrong step and come crashing through the ceiling, dropping into the hands of deputies, he is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now, as we get into last week's trial, let me remind you of another memory hook. I call it the tell of the taillights. The tell of the taillights. Something for you to remember. You know, there's broken taillight glass that was found on the lawn there where O'Keefe's body was found. Now, we all know that the defense is saying that that was planted by a crooked cop. And, of course, the prosecution is saying that it's evidence that he was hit by her car. And there is the fact that the car also, that morning, as they were going to look for John O'Keefe, did strike another vehicle backing out of John O'Keefe's driveway. And the defense says that that's when the taillight could have been cracked, and then it could have busted more as they put it on the tow truck to take it back to the Sally Port, and then that it was planted. While the prosecution says, on the other hand, well, no, that's not what happened. What happened was that it was cracked and busted when she hit John O'Keefe. So that is the tell of a taillight, and it is very important in this case. Now, our crazy crook crashed through the ceiling. And by the way, this is the real part of the case. No, not that the crazy crook crashed through the ceiling, but there was a car crash, or was there a car crash that took John O'Keefe's life? Was he killed as a result of Karen in reverse with that vehicle, or was he killed some other way? That's the real question. Now, after the prosecution, of course, rests the case, the attorney gets an opportunity to make a motion to dismiss the case, saying that the prosecution did not prove the case. So that's done just about all the time, and just about all the time the judge denies it. And surprise, 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 she denied this as well as they usually do in 97% of the cases. So now it's time for Reed's defense team. The first witness, an accident reconstruction expert, Michael DeSogra. Now, DeSogra is the director of engineering at a company called Delta, a reconstruction firm, accident reconstruction firm. He joined that company in 2013, and he has a master's. Did you hear that? A master's in mechanical engineering from the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. So you see where this is going. he is the guy who's mainly going to review Shannon Burgess' expert work for the prosecution. The same guy who his degree, or rather I should say lack of degree and misrepresented, was highlighted by the defense. Now, please remember, friend, it wasn't the fact that he did not have a bachelor's degree that was a big deal. The fact was, it appeared that the prosecution was hiding that fact, and that it had been presented as he did. There are a lot of experts who don't have college degrees, but you do not lie or misrepresent that to the jury and to the court. But so now comes his counterpart, who we will review his work, and of course, upon his direct testimony, Alan Jackson made sure to point out he not only has a college degree, but a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of North Carolina. So to get you ready for the defense, and what I call now the battle of the experts is coming, there are some other terms to help you build your memory hooks. That's the bonus part. Remember, we have the Proctor Factor. Now we have the BB factor, no broken bones. We have the tail of the tail light, easy to remember, right? Now I'm going to get you to another major piece of evidence, and I call it Clockgate. Yeah, that's right, Clockgate, like Watergate. Well, it's Clockgate, and it's very important in this case. Now, you might wonder why there's so much in this trial about retrieving and analyzing the VDR, which is the vehicle data recorder, and it's going to record certain events in the performance of that particular vehicle. It's also called data stream, and it's from the infotainment. That's that big screen you see on the middle of the dash in most of our automobiles. But here's where it's very important in the trial. You see, the defense is saying that Karen did not hit John O'Keefe, and that if you link Karen's vehicle clock to the John O'Keefe's cell phone when it was locked, which requires most of the time some human interaction to lock that phone, that if you will connect that at the same time, you're going to find that that occurred after the so-called reverse event of that vehicle. Therefore, it could not have been that she struck John O'Keefe. It boosters the defense theory. But then the prosecution comes around and says the clock's alignment says that his phone was locked in that alliance time of the reverse event while it happened. Then that would be in the avenue of the fact that the vehicle possibly crashed into him. So my friend, literally seconds matter in this case. Now the defense expert witness, the SOGRA, points out many problems he found in Burgess information from the prosecution. And it is Burgess information that the Hail Mary witness, Dr. Welcher, the last witness before him, relied on in his own reports. You see, Burgess built a timeline on the night that O'Keefe died that actually could link Reed to the crime that it could have happened at that time. He said O'Keefe's phone last locked during a brief moment that Reed's car recorded a backup maneuver. But now DeSorga comes around with his master's degree in engineering, and he testifies Friday that O'Keefe's last recorded interaction with his phone, its manual locking, was more likely to have happened after Reed's vehicle stopped going in reverse in front of the home on 34 Fairview. So you can see this is a battle of the experts. We're going to be talking more about that in the coming weeks of this trial. But I got to tell you what I liked about this witness, DeSorga, in this trial. You see, he appeared more open to follow the evidence instead of making the evidence fit his theory. He was not defensive when he was cross-examined. He was willing to look at the totality of it. While other witnesses for the prosecution were pushing back against cross-examination and became kind of a battle with him, he was just kind of a Jack Webb Dragnet moment. Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. Now, none of these witnesses, is very important to say that the digital recording event of her vehicle definitely records a crash with a person. The prosecution is saying that that event could have happened when she struck him. but the event does not give clear evidence whether the vehicle struck anyone or not. It's other evidence that the prosecutor is depending on to link that to being struck during the time that she was in reverse. But all of this has to do with how they handle the variances between the two clocks. Now, you probably already noticed yourself that the clock on your vehicle clock does not always reflect exactly to the second what your cell phone data says about the time. And these seconds can vary. And there are several ways that you calculate how that variance will then impact the case. In fact, it's become a big deal, such a big deal, that the prosecution had one study already written up in January, but unfortunately, it kind of leaned more to agree with the defense's timeline, not their own timeline. But guess what? They changed that. They had already written a report. They came back in the middle of the trial, and Burgess wanted to amend his report. And amazingly, the judge allowed him to do that. So they changed that theory in the middle of the trial. But this expert, he goes into more detail about how Burgess came to his conclusions in both the first and the second amended adjustments to reconcile the clocks. Now, what got my attention was this expert engineer said there were about 30 different ways to track this variance. And listen to this. 25 out of those 30 ways would line up with the defense's theory that the stop of O'Keefe's phone happened after the backup event of the Lexus, but only 3 out of 5, only 3 to 5 out of that 30, 3 to 5 out of that 30 would actually back up the prosecution. That's what this expert is saying. How will that resonate with the jury? Well, my friend, it's going to come down to which experts the jury are going to believe and which experts are most reliable. So, my friend, Clockgate is very important in this trial. The tell of the tail lights is very important. Prosecution says tail light shattered on the night Karen hit him. Defense says, well, there was a biased lead investigator cop, and he planted the evidence to protect other cops that were in that house that night. You see where this is going, right? So we're going to have the battle of the experts. Now remember, during the last trial, it was the ARCA witness, another accidental reconstruction company. They're yet to come. And I got to tell you, in my mind, they were far the most believable in the first trial. Of course, they were going up against Trooper Paul, not against experts like the prosecution's brought this time. You see, and one of the reasons why they came into the trial, the ARCA witnesses, they were not hired by the prosecution of the defense. They were hired by the federal government that was investigating the investigation because of Proctor and other things. But in the second trial now, the jury's not going to hear that they were not hired by either and were more neutral in judgment. I can imagine that had a lot of sway with the first jury. But they're not going to hear that about the ARCA witnesses that come, because now they've been hired by the defense. And in the first trial, they strongly reported that John O'Keefe's injuries and the damage to the vehicle was not consistent with a pedestrian hit. Well, and in this trial, though, they're going to face Brennan as the prosecutor on the cross. And remember, Brennan, he's a seasoned defense attorney, and he does know how to cross-examine a witness. Will this make a difference? By the way, on cross-examination, Matthew DeSogra, the defense expert, he held up really well. In fact, I was wondering what Brennan was doing. He actually had DeSoga agree that he only reviewed Burgess and Welch's reports. He didn't do his own analysis. Well, that's why he was called to review the reports. But then, I can't believe what he asked. He actually said this. Well, let me ask you this, he said, if Burgess' data was wrong, would not his analysis be incorrect as well, since he based it on Burgess' report? And DeSoga, he couldn't believe that he handed him that question. He agreed. He said, yep. He said, you're right. Bad data in, bad data out. The only problem with this, my friend, is that the bad data that he's talking about is from his own expert witness. Why would you ask that? Tell me, how would that help Brennan's case? Asking this expert, well, if my expert was wrong and incorrect, then that means your report would be wrong and incorrect. You know what he just said to the jury? he gave the idea that maybe his expert was wrong. I couldn't believe that. I believe Brennan kind of made a mistake on that one. Well, in summary today, last week I do believe that Brennan had his Hail Mary. Welcher was a strong witness who at least put in some jury's mind how vehicle might have hit O'Keefe. And that combined with the taillight pieces could perhaps move this jury to convict Karen Reed. But even with that, there was a whole lot of doubt brought on by the defense as they were questioning the prosecution's own witnesses. And remember, they're just getting started. Yet to come is the Archive team, including Crash Daddy himself. Now, if you don't know about Crash Daddy, you need to go to Charlie Crimebuster first trial coverage and hear about Crash Daddy, because Crash Daddy will be coming to the stand, and you're going to hear a lot of information. But will it be enough to get the jury to reasonable doubt? Or will it be a stronger case, this time by the prosecution, to bring a conviction? And if they have reasonable doubt, will they vote Karen Reed not guilty on all those accounts? A whole lot of stuff yet to happen. And we're going to bring it to you as it happens in the courtroom. We're going to tell you all about it on next week's Charlie Crimebuster. By the way, don't forget to join James Buckland and I in the middle of the week with our YouTube channel as we discuss this podcast. We always throw in some new things that we picked up in the current week's trial. So join us on YouTube. Just hashtag it Charlie Crimebuster. And until next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and also encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. peacemakernetwork.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @Charlie Crimebuster. And once you arrive there, click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts are for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you. So please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you may call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.